Okay, let's talk about what happens when music itself is put on trial.
Many songs are about things we can all relate to, like celebrating language. Or they talk about family, asking questions that really hit home for everyone. And of course, that deep love for your homeland and where you come from.
But imagine if all those songs suddenly became illegal, labeled as security threats.
Well, in Xinjiang, that's exactly what's happening to hundreds of Uyghur songs. Leaked documents show the state frames this music as an ideological weapon. And it's not random. The government sorted them into 7 specific categories. So category 1, it bans songs they say twist history or push for separatism. Other categories ban any songs that show hardship, grief, or any kind of dissent.
It goes so far that even lullabies get banned if they have religious references.
And what's wild is this censorship is retroactive. We're talking about the same songs. These were once approved by state censors, even played on state TV. So what happens if you listen to or share one of these songs now?
Well, using one for a photo's background music could get you 10 days in detention.
Another guy got locked up just for sharing a couple of songs on WeChat. Yep, same punishment. The message is pretty clear. Sharing this music is a crime. People are now told to police themselves and even report suspicious music.
Now, officials will tell you it's only about 120 songs that are banned.
But leaked info shows the list is way longer and the categories are super broad. So it's not just about music. Songs about family, faith, and memory become evidence. Which leaves you with a big question. When music is evidence, what's really being policed? Let's break down how the Chinese government is turning Uyghur music into a crime. Take this song title. Sounds like a heartbreaking question from a child, right? Well, this is how the Chinese government officially describes songs just like that one. So, how can a song about family be a threat? To get it, we have to look at their logic. The key actually comes from a leaked recording of a government indoctrination session. See, for them, the real front line for national security is controlling people's ideology. And songs are seen as weapons used by Western enemies to stir up trouble. So they made a whole system to classify music, breaking problematic songs into 7 categories. First up, any song that supposedly twists history or pushes for separatism. The second category targets any music they say promotes terrorism or extremism. Third, they ban songs that force religion on people, specifically referencing Islam. Category 4 is for music that slanders people's happy lives or criticizes the government. The fifth outlaws songs with religious themes that might distract from worldly lives. And the last 2? They target songs that hurt an official's reputation or are just immoral. So, what's the actual punishment for listening to or even just sharing this music? Just for sharing a song online, you could get 10 days in detention. And these aren't hypotheticals. These are real cases taken right from that leaked recording. But here's the wild part. Many of these songs used to be totally fine, even approved. It's something called retroactive censorship. What was legal yesterday is suddenly a crime today. So the real question becomes, why has normal cultural expression been turned into a threat? Because in this system, simple songs about family, faith, or history, they aren't art. They're treated as evidence of your private thoughts and your personal loyalty. And that leaves you with a pretty chilling question. If memory itself is a crime, what isn't?
Imagine a song you love, maybe one about where you're from, or a lullaby you heard as a kid. Now, what if listening to that song could get you arrested? In this explainer, we're going to look at how a huge catalog of Uyghur music, something woven deep into the culture, is being systematically relabeled as a crime.
So to really understand what's at stake here, let's first talk about the stories this music tells. And we're not talking about obscure political anthems. These are songs about life, loss, and love, themes that pretty much all of us can connect with.
Some of these songs speak to our most basic human connections, asking a question that just cuts right to the heart of what family means.
Then you have others that carry these really powerful moral pleas, to protect the most vulnerable people in society. And of course, just like music from all over the world, a lot of songs express that deep, profound connection to the place you call home. And some are just filled with this powerful sense of resilience, this absolute determination to survive no matter the odds. Look, these are just a handful of examples from a massive collection of songs that really capture the whole human experience. You could almost call it a dictionary of everyday life. But this is exactly where our story takes a very dark turn. And this isn't just some hypothetical question. For many Uyghurs, this is the reality they face every single day. And it's at the very heart of what we're digging into today. So you have to ask, how did we get here? What's so important to understand is that the music itself didn't change. What changed was how the state started to see it.
According to a report from the Kashgar Times, which is a key source for this explainer, we're talking about music that was once totally fine, even performed on state television, that is now suddenly seen as dangerous.
Now, a lot of our understanding about this shift comes from a pretty incredible and rare source, a leaked audio recording. It's from a government indoctrination session for workers in Kashgar. And in that recording, you hear officials claim that music is being used as a tool to destabilize things, to mess up people's ideology. They link it directly to what they call the three evils: terrorism, separatism, and religious extremism.
So, how does this all work in practice? I mean, how do they enforce this? Well, the government didn't just put out some vague warning. Now, it created a whole formal system just for classifying this music.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. They came up with 7 distinct categories for labeling a song as illegal. And this framework tells you so much about what the state is actually afraid of. It's not just obvious things like promoting terror, it's stuff as vague as slandering happy lives by inciting negativity. And this slide right here gives you a real sense of just how wide that net is cast. Under the very first category, songs with titles like My Homeland, My Mother Tongue, and even a song called Friendship are all classified as inciting separatism. And it doesn't stop there. The categories also cover religious themes. Just look at this. Songs called Thankful, Pure Love, even a traditional lullaby, are all banned because they supposedly contain complaints about reality or have ties to pan-Islamic ideology. Okay, so this is the crucial question, right? What actually happens if someone gets caught with one of these songs on their phone? Well, that leaked recording we mentioned gets into some specific case studies, and in a few of the examples they give, individuals were detained for 10 days, right under China's anti-terrorism law. And get this, the crime that led to this wasn't going to a protest or publishing some manifesto. Nope. In the cases they mentioned, it was as simple as using one of these songs as background music for a personal picture that was shared on social media. So the indoctrination session actually wrapped up with these instructions for the workers on how to basically self-police their own music habits. The message is crystal clear. The responsibility to avoid punishment is completely on the individual. Now, as you can probably imagine, people have wildly different ways of interpreting all of this. And the source material itself really reflects this deep, deep divide. On one hand, the article's view frames this as systematic cultural erasure disguised as security policy. But on the other hand, a reader's comment argues the complete opposite, that the government has actually saved thousands of Uyghurs who would have ended up radicalized, and that its actions are just. And this brings us right to the core tension here. It's this fundamental clash between a government's stated mission to ensure national security and the fight to preserve a people's most basic forms of culture and art. And that really leaves us with a final thought. When a simple song about a mother's love can be classified as a national security threat, who gets to decide what that music really means? Because in a world where art is treated like evidence, the power to define its meaning is no longer in the hands of the artist or even the listener. That power lies somewhere else entirely.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is the place where we take that stack of sources you have, all the articles, the research, the data, and we turn it into targeted, nuanced expertise. We're here to give you the ultimate shortcut to being well-informed, complete with those surprising facts and compelling connections that, they really stick with you long after the conversation is over. Our mission today is, it's a profound one. We're diving into that deep, very challenging space where culture clashes and clashes violently with state control. Specifically, we're going to analyze a massive and frankly disturbing catalog of cultural expression, 120 banned Uyghur song titles. Our goal is to study the official, documented campaign that labels these songs as illegal, a campaign that effectively turns, an everyday love song or a nostalgic tune about your parents into an existential national security threat.
And it's so important to frame the scale of this right from the start. We are not looking at a state banning a few, fringe, genuinely subversive pieces of propaganda.
No, not at all.
We're analyzing songs about family, about the landscape, about friendship, and about faith. I mean, these are the absolute basic building blocks of cultural memory for any society on Earth.
Right.
And the central paradox we really have to unpack is this. Many of these songs weren't just publicly available. They were previously approved. They were published, recorded, even performed on state television.
So the question isn't just what is banned.
Exactly. It's what changes when cultural heritage itself is retroactively deemed a weapon of separatism.
Okay, so let's unpack this with the source material we have. It's incredibly rich, and as you said, it is quite chilling. Our primary document is a multilingual lexicon. It lists all 120 of these banned song names. And critically, these titles aren't just in one language. They're provided in Uyghur, Latin, Cyrillic, English, Chinese, Turkish, Japanese, Russian, and Arabic.
And that sheer variety of translations, I mean, 9 languages in total, that is an immediate, tangible indicator of the international reach and the cultural significance of this music.
It's not just some isolated folk tradition.
No, this is music that has resonated and been shared across linguistic and national borders, especially throughout the Turkic world. And that alone, just raises the political stakes immediately.
And our second key source gives us the mechanism of control.
Yes.
We have a leaked transcript and the audio that goes with it from an official government indoctrination session. This session was mandatory for Uyghur workers in Kashgar.
Right.
And the document explicitly details the 7 official sort of legalistic categories of problematic songs. It's the state's own playbook.
It is. It gives us the official justification for turning a simple poem into a prosecution under anti-terrorism law.
That document is just a stunning piece of political communication.
It is, because it gives us the language of control. It moves the whole discussion out of this realm of, abstract human rights concerns and places it squarely into the realm of official documented policy. We can see exactly how the state draws the lines between art and crime.
So before we get to the mechanisms of censorship, let's just establish the context. If we look purely at the titles in this catalog, what do they tell us about the core concerns, the emotional landscape of the people who created and listened to this music?
The titles themselves are a detailed, intimate, and just profoundly human portrait of Uyghur life. When you start to categorize the 120 songs, the themes that emerge are, well, they're universal, yet they're so specific. And they show exactly why they're so essential to preserving identity and, as a result, why they're being targeted.
Let's start with what seems to be the most politically sensitive and largest category, themes of homeland and identity. These titles show a fierce, abiding connection to place, to belonging, that just transcends any political framework.
They're really just declarations of self. You see titles like Uyghurum, which translates simply to
My Uyghur.
My Uyghur, exactly. A clear, direct statement of self-identification. Then there's Yurtum, meaning my homeland, and Anayurt Marshi, which is homeland march.
So these are fundamentally about cultural cohesion, a kind of national pride.
They are, but they also escalate pretty quickly into more historically charged references.
Such as Kokbo, the blue wolf.
Precisely. The blue wolf reference is incredibly significant. It carries this deep, ancient, historical, and mythological weight across almost all Turkic cultures.
It's a founding symbol.
It is.
Yeah.
It represents resilience, strength, ancestral guidance. And to the Chinese state, any symbol of a pre-existing non-Han national identity, especially one that links Uyghurs to this broader Turkic lineage stretching across Central Asia, is viewed as inherently subversive.
Because it speaks to a history that's independent of Beijing.
Exactly. And this sense of belonging, it gets incredibly specific when you look at the geographical mentions. They aren't just singing about some abstract idea of a homeland.
No, they're naming specific cities, rivers, regions. They're basically mapping their identity onto the land itself.
They are. The source material highlights titles that specifically name regions vital to Uyghur cultural geography. You have Atush, Ili Nakshisi, the Song of Ili, Ili Boyliri, along the Ili, and Mining Altaim, my Altai.
So by naming these places,
they're asserting a cultural claim to the memory and the history of that specific geography. This is why a song like Turkestanga Begishlamen, I dedicate this to Turkestan, is such a severe trigger for the state.
Right, because the propaganda video later cites it as proof of pan-Turkism.
Which they view as an existential, irredentist threat.
Okay, let's just pause on that for a moment. Pan-Turkism. For many of our listeners, this might just sound like an academic term. Why is the cultural concept of Turkic solidarity such a threat to the CCP?
Because the state's narrative demands that the identity of the Uyghur people be contained. It has to be specific, and it has to be entirely loyal to the central government within the People's Republic of China.
Right.
Pan-Turkism suggests a cultural and historical kinship, a shared linguistic, ethnic ancestry that spans borders. It connects Uyghurs to Turkey, to Central Asian republics, to other groups.
So it provides an alternative, powerful reference point for identity.
A reference point that is completely outside Beijing's control. So by labeling it an existential threat, the state justifies eliminating any cultural marker that reinforces that cross-border independent identity.
And going back to the local, you mentioned the song Aniyurt, My Motherland. The opening lyric, as our sources cite it, is just a list of 12 major cities: Kashgar, Khotan, Yarkand, Turpan, Urumqi. The list goes on. Why is listing 12 cities considered a dangerous act?
It's a beautifully simple and powerful act of cultural preservation. That list is basically a mnemonic device, a memory tool.
Yeah.
It preserves the Uyghur names, the correct pronunciation, the cultural significance and interconnectedness of that landscape, all within a traditional familiar art form.
So when the state is actively engaged in restructuring the physical and linguistic landscape, erasing old names and historical memories.
A song that simply lists those names becomes an act of resistance. It preserves a sense of belonging that's tied to culture, not to political administration. When the state defines belonging only through political loyalty, any strong, independently expressed geographic bond is viewed as an immediate act of disloyalty.
It's a political act disguised as a geography lesson. Wow. Okay, let's move from that sprawling landscape to the deeply intimate, the category of family, relationship, and personal loss.
This is perhaps the most poignant category. It shows the raw human core of the culture. These are universal themes. But in the context of mass detentions and family separations, they take on this heartbreaking contemporary relevance.
You can see it in the titles, Ata Anam Kayerde, Where Are My Parents? That's no longer an abstract question.
No, it's the soundtrack of a society experiencing immense separation and grief.
The titles just read like direct expressions of human pain. Yitalmidim atamga, I couldn't reach my father, and mohim lakinni MD bildim dada. Father, now I know your worth.
These aren't subtle political manifestos. They are expressions of love, of grief, of the struggle to maintain familial bonds.
And we also see the kind of longing you'd expect in relationship songs.
Absolutely. Things like Sekinding Mu, Did You Miss Me, and Yarum Kelmidi, My Beloved Didn't Come. Alongside purer concepts like Pak Mohabbat, pure love.
These reflect universal struggles.
They do. Love, loss, desire for connection. But when these songs are sung by a population that's facing widespread state-enforced separation, they inadvertently become documentation of social struggle and suffering.
And as we're going to see in the official categories, just articulating social struggle is enough to be labeled as inciting negativity.
Exactly. It undermines the state's narrative of mandated progress and happiness.
That's a sharp pivot. If personal grief or longing is interpreted as a political critique, then even internal reflection becomes a threat. Which leads us to the third category of themes: moral and social commentary. I was really struck by how many titles urge integrity and caution.
These songs function as the musical transmission of folk wisdom, of traditional ethical frameworks. They instruct society on how to behave ethically, how to navigate complexity.
And you see that in titles like Ras Sozlesh, Speak the Truth.
Speak the truth. Palchea Ishin Manglor, Don't Trust Fortune Tellers, Matanma, Don't Boast. And, critically, Widan Sariki, which means call of conscience.
Let's linger on that one. Widan Sariki, the call of conscience. Why is promoting an internalized moral compass, a reliance on your own conscience, viewed as such a threat?
Because it introduces a supreme reference point for morality that is independent of the state.
Ah, I see.
If individuals use their conscience, their Widan Sariki, as their ultimate moral guide, they are necessarily less dependent on the party's constant guidance and pronouncements. The state requires absolute ideological control.
Meaning the only acceptable source of morality, of ethics, of truth, has to come from the party itself.
Precisely. The moral sphere, just like the geographic sphere, is yet another space the government must occupy exclusively. So, promoting independent integrity becomes an implicit challenge to party infallibility.
And that conflict between independent morality and state-mandated ethics brings us to the final major theme we see throughout this catalog: religious and spiritual life.
These songs are core expressions of Islamic identity. They often blend spiritual reflection with local cultural life. They range from explicit declarations of faith like Islam Digin Nime, What is Islam, and Ramazan Nakshisi, the Ramadan song.
Two songs of divine reliance and protection.
Exactly. Hudim Menisakla, God Protect Me, Hemija Kadir Buiksat, the Almighty, and Allah Biridu, God provides.
It's just astonishing to consider that a simple act of piety, like singing a song about the month of Ramadan, is now classified as a security threat.
It becomes a security threat when the state defines the only acceptable spirituality as loyalty to the party's secular agenda. The existence of a higher authority, even when it's expressed through a simple folk song about thankfulness or prayer, is seen as competing for the allegiance of the population.
So they link it instantly to extremism.
Instantly. The state views organized faith as a potential vector for pan-Islamism, linking it to extremism regardless of the song's actual content. This is why even the most subtle spiritual references are being systematically targeted for elimination, as we'll see when we get into the specific categories.
It's jarring to realize the depth of that cultural meaning we just explored, but that takes us directly to the next question.
What?
How does the state justify turning a love song, a geography lesson, or an expression of grief into a legal threat?
Right.
And this is where the deep dive gets really interesting, because we have the government's own playbook from that leaked audio.
That leaked recording from the indoctrination session in Kashgar, it provides a stunningly clear, unvarnished view of the state's reasoning and its mechanism of control.
And the official running the session was brutally clear.
He was. He told the mandatory attendees, "We are not putting on an exhibition, write all this down since we are telling you." They are being forced to document the tools of their own cultural eradication.
The official justification laid out in the propaganda video they played is, it's classic ideological warfare. They claim ideology is the front line of national security.
And that's the critical warped logic. The official argument is that to destabilize a society and overthrow the government starts from the penetration of ideology and messing up people's ideology.
So the theory is that if the cultural and ideological defense breaks down,
then all other defenses, military, economic, political, they can't be maintained. Therefore, songs are immediately portrayed not as art, but as weapons.
as tools used by external forces, Western enemy powers, and the internal three evils they always talk about.
Separatism, extremism, terrorism, exactly. So any Uyghur cultural expression, particularly anything tied to language, faith, or history, is immediately equated with pan-Islamism and pan-Turkism, and these two concepts are labeled as fundamental existential threats to the state's integrity.
It's a mechanism designed to just collapse all nuance.
All nuance and difference, yes.
Yeah.
Cultural difference isn't just tolerated, it must be assimilated or eliminated. Anything that reinforces an independent cultural identity is placed under the umbrella of political subversion.
But the most chilling finding here, the one that truly sets this policy apart, is the concept of retroactive criminalization.
Yes, we have to stress this.
Yeah.
Because it's a critical insight from the source material. These songs weren't obscure, they were mainstream.
Right.
The source material states clearly that most of the listed songs were previously approved by official Chinese censorship bodies. They were published, recorded, broadcast on state television, performed publicly with official authorization.
So the music itself didn't change.
Nothing changed. The state's political tolerance changed. The state is essentially saying that the legality of your cultural past is fluid and it's entirely dependent on the present political climate.
So the moment the state decides that any Uyghur expression that preserves memory or identity outside of party control is dangerous,
then all previously approved culture becomes suspect. It forces people to participate in the erasure of their own past, even the past the government had once sanctioned.
Imagine listening to a song that was played on your state television 10 years ago, and now that song can get you arrested under an anti-terrorism law.
It creates immense psychological pressure. It ensures that self-censorship becomes total.
And this leads directly to the communication style we noted in the leaked audio. The official tries to downplay it, right? He says something like, we have many songs, we have a few thousand songs, the government is only banning 120-odd songs.
That minimization is key. They try to suggest this is a minor surgical correction, but immediately after minimizing the number, they lay out 7 official categories.
And these categories are so sweeping.
So vague and so easily manipulated, they encompass the vast majority of traditional and contemporary Uyghur musical expression we just discussed,
So it's a way of simultaneously denying the scale of the cultural eradication.
while providing the ideological hammer necessary to justify it. It is political doublespeak in its purest form.
Okay, so let's move to Section 3 and really dissect these 7 official categories. This is the core of the state's playbook, and we need to use the specific song examples cited in the government's own transcript to truly understand the reach and the absurdity of this ban.
Let's start with Category 1. This is the foundation of the ideological attack. problematic songs that twist Uyghur history, promote separatism, or incite ethnic hatred.
So if we look at the cited examples, songs about mother tongue, about land, about identity, why is singing about your mother tongue, Anatilim, or your own identity, Uigurum, now considered twisting history?
Because the state's historical narrative dictates that the current cultural and political climate is the zenith of progress, and that it's been achieved through the benevolent guidance of the central government.
Right.
So, to claim your identity or your mother tongue is important, independent of the party's support, is to implicitly challenge that state-mandated version of history. It reframes cultural pride as political incitement.
So this category targets any cultural memory that suggests a distinct pre-CCP history.
Or a future outside the party's vision. Songs celebrating historically charged concepts like the blue wolf or specific geographical names are immediate red flags. This is why Turkistenga Bigishleman, I dedicate this to Turkestan, is cited, reinforcing that link to the existential pan-Turkism threat.
The source also mentions Birden Bir Turkey, one religion, one Turkey, falling under this banner. That makes the fear of a broader, connected Turkic identity pretty explicit.
It does, and the scope of this category is just massive. The official claims that these songs deny the governance under the CCP, that every ethnic group's livelihood in Xinjiang is getting better day by day.
So if a song like Atanam Kayerd, Where Are My Parents, expresses suffering or longing?
The state views that as creating fake evidence to attack our country and party. The sheer number of cultural leaders and prominent jailed singers, like Abdurrahim Hait, whose work falls heavily here, it just shows that this category is the primary tool used to neutralize cultural leadership.
Okay, let's move to category 2. Promoting extremism and slandering party governance. This is where the state takes any social struggle, any dissatisfaction, and immediately collapses it into a national security threat.
This category is designed to eliminate any sign of public dissatisfaction or grievance. These songs are accused of showing dissatisfaction with the party, and the language used in the leaked transcript is just. It's absolutely hyperbolic.
I mean, they claim these songs have jihadi ideology.
Jihadi ideology, and they call to build a world with the sword, even though the actual song title suggests things like hardship, despair, or resilience.
We're talking about titles like Men, Olmemen, I Will Not Die, Chanaman, I Cry Out, Surgerdin Wanderer, and Tur Ornington, Stand Up. How does a song titled I Will Not Die suddenly become an instrument of jihad?
Because the state cannot tolerate any expression of defiance or existential struggle that suggests the system is failing. If you are a wanderer, or if you have to cry out, you are fundamentally questioning the mandated narrative of happy, integrated prosperity.
So the state equates the search for truth, or the expression of defiance,
with promoting a bloody encounter and challenging social stability. If you articulate hardship, you are promoting extremism, because hardship is supposed to be impossible under party governance.
Now we enter the religious categories, starting with category 3, forcing religious belief. And the official justification here is that these songs sabotage the government's freedom of religion policy. The paradox is just so stark.
It is the ultimate reversal of logic. The category targets the most basic expressions of piety or celebration. We see the inclusion of the Ramazan Nakshisi, the Ramadan song, Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you, a common greeting, and Allah Viridu, God provides.
These are fundamental cultural touchstones.
They are. And by criminalizing them, the state is making the point that the only religious freedom tolerated is the one defined and controlled by the state apparatus.
But the list has an incredibly surprising inclusion here that illustrates the arbitrary nature of the ban. Paisha Klizning Muhabeti, love of the Paisha girl. How does a love song fit into the category of forcing religious belief?
This inclusion is a profound insight into the censorship mechanism. It suggests the censors aren't just looking for overt religious statements, they are listening for context and association.
I see.
Perhaps the song contains a subtle religious reference, or maybe the artist is known to be pious or has previously expressed problematic views. Whatever the reason, it means the classification is fluid, subjective, and arbitrary.
So any song can be pulled into this category.
It can. It eliminates safety. You can't even guarantee a love song is safe.
That sets the stage for category 4, slandering happy lives and inciting negativity. This is the state's mandatory optimism clause, explicitly targeting music that is critical of reality or suggests the need for moral correction.
This is a direct defense of the illusion of social stability. The official transcript states these songs attack our region's anti-terror policy, social stability, and trigger people's cultural identity to slander our government's social stability policy efforts.
So, simply put, if you suggest things are not perfect, you are attacking counterterrorism efforts.
Yes. So when a song like Pakyasha, Live Purely, or Ras Sozlish, Speak the Truth, or Hekikaketish, Return to Truth, urges moral uprightness, it is instantly interpreted as a political attack.
Because the implication is that if society needs to return to truth or live purely, then the governing authority must have failed.
And that is a dangerous political message. Furthermore, songs that criticize social ills like Harak Ikish, which is drinking alcohol, are framed as destabilizing. The criticism of individual behavior is instantly transformed into criticism of the party's management of society. This category eliminates the possibility of any internal moral correction or social commentary outside of the state's narrative.
Okay, moving to category 5. Religious themes detaching people from worldly lives. This is another religion-focused category, but it seems to target deeper, more nuanced spiritual language and philosophical contemplation.
It does. This category targets the very philosophy of contemplation or spiritual withdrawal. It accuses these songs of containing very religious themes that send a negative message or are full of complaints about reality.
And it directly counteracts the state's demand for productivity and focus on secular materialism.
Right, and the official transcript specifically notes that the inclusion of terms like halal and haram in lyrics is viewed as containing remnants of pan-Islamic ideology.
Let's unpack that. Why are those two linguistic markers so specifically targeted?
Halal and haram are more than just vocabulary. They're an entire comprehensive moral and legal system for classifying everything from food to finance to daily conduct.
And this system is derived from religious law.
A source that is wholly independent of, and in some cases potentially contradictory to, state law. By targeting these terms, the state is attempting to eradicate an entire moral vocabulary used by Uyghurs to structure their lives, forcing them to rely exclusively on state-approved definitions of good and bad conduct.
That's terrifying. It's an ideological cleansing of language itself.
Precisely. And this is evident in the example cited. Islam Diganamin, what is Islam, and Shukri, thankful, are listed. But the most intimate inclusion here is the lullaby alay.
A lullaby.
Lullaby. If even a lullaby, a piece of music central to the most private domestic act of a mother singing to her child, is deemed problematic for its traditional or religious chanting. Well, it shows the campaign's intent to eliminate even the most subtle forms of cultural transmission at the level of the home.
The scope is totalizing.
It leaves no cultural space untouched.
Next, category 6, slander against party officials. This is about criminalizing criticism, especially satirical criticism of local governance.
This category provides the immediate defense mechanism for the ruling structure. Criticism of local officials is instantly framed as damaging the relationship between the people and officials and slandering the party's reputation.
Which in turn is linked to damaging social stability.
Right. The government is creating a perfect feedback loop. Officials must appear infallible, and any humor or critique that undermines that image is treated as a national security issue.
The song examples here really highlight the power of satire being crushed. Bashlik Kiladu, The Leader is Coming, Bashlikor Leaders, and the incredibly specific, satirical Tumas Toho, The Barren Rooster.
They do sound like they use folk humor to critique incompetence or authority. Satire is one of the most powerful tools societies have to hold power accountable, and that is exactly why it must be banned. The Barren Rooster likely uses a metaphor of incompetence, but in this system, the reputation of a local official is seen as inextricably linked to national authority. Undermining a village leader is seen as undermining the central government.
Finally, we have category 7, low morals and promiscuity. This just appears to serve as the ultimate subjective catch-all category.
It is. It's the final net cast to ensure comprehensive control. These songs are deemed morally low and accused of promoting promiscuity, having a negative effect on social life, and twisting reality.
And because the definitions are so vague, what are low morals? The category can be applied to almost any cultural expression the state simply doesn't like.
And the example cited proves that. It's Sheher Baziri, which means city market.
A song about a city market.
If a song about everyday life, commerce, or meeting people in a marketplace can be pulled in under low morals, then the entire classification system is rendered entirely subjective and applicable to literally anything. The very act of living can be deemed morally corrupt if the state decides it doesn't fit the approved narrative.
So we've established that the songs are ordinary cultural expressions, and the government's justifications are politically manufactured and just absurdly broad. Now, we have to make this threat concrete. What are the real-world legal consequences if you are caught with one of these songs?
The consequences are immediate and severe because they are enforced under the highest security threat level. The official transcript explicitly states that listening to, downloading, or sharing these songs is prosecuted under the People's Republic of China Anti-Terrorism Law, Act 80, Section 2, for sharing extremist materials.
That immediately elevates the stakes from, a cultural or copyright infringement to a counterterrorism offense. This law is typically reserved for dealing with violent organizations, explosives, threats to infrastructure.
And now it's being applied to background music. By classifying background music as extremist materials, the state avoids standard procedures and applies the full weight of national security law, ensuring draconian and swift punishment for a simple song.
And the sources provide 3 clear, detailed case studies that illustrate the chillingly minor nature of the crime. We need to pause on these because they are crucial to understanding the surveillance state's digital reach.
Let's review them. We have KCAX. He was a 22-year-old male who was using one of the most popular short video platforms in China, Kuaishu.
And his crime?
His crime was sharing a video using the banned song You Dedi Yak Yak as background music over his own photo.
So for a selfie?
For this act of digital self-expression, he was detained for 10 days for sharing extremist materials.
The background music for a selfie earns you a 10-day detention under the anti-terrorism law. We just have to let that sink in. It tells you everything you need to know about the lack of separation between private life and state security.
Case MeOX is equally illustrative. A 21-year-old male shared 2 songs, Hotelamsin Membalan and Vidans's Bala, on his WeChat friend zone.
And WeChat is the dominant social media app there, right?
It's everything. It's Facebook and WhatsApp combined. Sharing music with friends online, a common activity everywhere in the world, was deemed spreading religious extremist materials and resulted in 10 days of detention.
So the state is actively monitoring private social circles and digital sharing within one of the most closed communication ecosystems in the world.
And the third case, RoX, a 32-year-old male, used the song Men Hayat I Am Life as background music over his own photo and shared it on his Douyin account, the Chinese version of TikTok.
I am life.
Again, using a song whose title simply means I am life as atmosphere for a personal picture was classified as spreading religious extremist materials under the anti-terrorism law, resulting in a 10-day detention.
The punishment is immediate, and the definition of extremist materials is broad enough to include songs about saying I am life. This isn't just about policing professional performance. It's about controlling the atmosphere, the tone, the musical backdrop of entirely personal digital sharing.
That's the key takeaway. The threat is concrete and immediate, and it is enforced through an omnipresent surveillance infrastructure designed to prevent, not just punish.
The source material provides explicit instructions given to the workers during that indoctrination session, indicating the depth of technological surveillance they rely on.
Right. The official referenced 149,000 registered smartphone devices just in the single province of Yengisar. That figure alone provides context for the scale of the digital dragnet.
And the instructions given to the workers are designed to eliminate any room for ambiguity or independent thought.
They ensure the population actively participates in its own policing. Workers are explicitly told, first, they must only download music from officially sanctioned apps that are, of course, monitored and controlled by the state.
Second,
if a song is unsearchable in official apps, the workers must conclude it is problematic and immediately report it. There is no middle ground of obscurity.
And the final instruction is the ultimate chilling effect.
It is. If they are unsure about a song, they are explicitly told to call the police, 110, or go to the police department to seek advice.
Imagine having to call the police because you don't know if a lullaby on your phone is evidence of an ideological crime.
It turns law enforcement into a cultural guidance counselor, ensuring that any uncertainty is immediately resolved in favor of state control.
And the government official's final warning seals the intent of the entire program. We urge the minority of you to not try your luck and erase the songs immediately.
This whole campaign is about turning daily cultural habits into grounds for surveillance and ensuring that Uyghurs actively participate in the erasure of their own identity. It reaches into the most minute choice, the background music for a personal photo. This is the definition of total ideological control, where music is not art, but evidence of loyalty or disloyalty.
This has been a profound deep dive into how ideological warfare is waged at the level of folk music and digital consumption. Our mission today was to analyze this catalog of 120 banned songs and the official campaign labeling them as illegal under the guise of counterterrorism.
And the key insight, I think, is that the state's 7 categories of problematic songs are not a surgical campaign. They are a systematic, comprehensive attempt to erase cultural memory by criminalizing the entire soundtrack of everyday life.
Right. Songs of faith, family, landscape, moral duty.
They're all swept up using broad, fluid legal definitions rooted in ideological intolerance.
The government's own words, documented in that leaked transcript, show how Uyghur culture is being redefined not as art or heritage, but as evidence of disloyalty, separatism, or extremism.
It's an ideological war fought against nostalgia, memory, conscience, and the very act of cultural self-definition. It forces individuals to police not only their own physical behavior, but their internal thoughts and their preferences, right down to the choice of a lullaby or a mournful song about a lost parent. The consequence is the dismantling of cultural identity itself.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought for you to consider. If the songs you listen to today, the ones about your life, your home, or your parents, could be retroactively declared a crime tomorrow, earning you a 10-day detention for simply being the background music on your social media post, what part of your identity would you have to erase first to stay safe? It leaves us with the ultimate question of cultural survival in an environment of total ideological control.
Welcome back to The Critique. Today we're looking at a really extensive project, a multilingual dictionary of Uyghur song titles set against a translated report on how the state is criminalizing those very same songs.
It's an incredibly important submission. I mean, what we have here is a document that's both a deep linguistic resource and really an urgent political statement. The foundational work is just exceptional.
I agree. The scope alone is just, wow, over 100 titles in 9 languages. But I think for this critique, we need to focus on how to take it from being an excellent catalog to being an essential cultural defense document.
Absolutely. And that leads right into our first point, which is really about the project's core essence. Right now, you have this powerful duality, the simple act of translation on one side and the harsh reality of state bans on the other. But they feel like 2 separate documents.
Right, it's like the dictionary list itself is presented first, almost as a neutral linguistic artifact. You, as the reader, have to do the work of connecting it to the political context to understand the gravity of it all.
And that's the weakness. The true strength and, I think, the profound necessity of this project lies not merely in the translations, but in explicitly connecting these titles to the political reality of cultural criminalization.
So the separation is obscuring its own significance.
Exactly. It misses a massive opportunity to define itself as a vital act of cultural preservation. We can't let these titles exist in a vacuum when their very existence is, well, it's being criminalized.
That's a crucial point. If the goal is to act as counter-evidence, the data needs to fight back right from the start. But, how do you do that without overwhelming the user? Do you risk sacrificing that clean dictionary format?
Well, the suggestion here is about integration, not just juxtaposition. The idea is to integrate that political context directly into the metadata. It would transform the list from a static compilation into a dynamic defense document.
So the history of the band becomes part of the song's definition.
It has to be. The user should be forced to confront that reality right alongside the linguistic data. So, for instance, for every song title that's explicitly cited in that government transcript, titles like Uyghur or Anatilam.
My Uyghur, my mother tongue, right.
Right. For those, you add a dedicated metadata field. Maybe you label it Criminalization category or Basis for ban.
And this field wouldn't just say banned, it would need to cite the specific reason from the state's own propaganda.
Precisely. It should indicate the specific legal basis for its ban. So, Category 1, twisting Uyghur history and inciting separatism. Or Category 3, promote religious ideology. And on top of that, you have to note the titles that are directly linked to punishment.
Like the ones that led to 10-day detentions.
Exactly. Songs like You Dedi Yak Yak or Men Hayat. You cite the anti-terrorism law. You cite the specific category. You're leveraging the state's own data to define the song's current status.
That's really powerful. I mean, you're turning the list into a documented legal challenge just by adding a column. So if we manage to integrate that political context, the next question is, does the structure itself support that complexity?
And that brings us to our second point, which is all about structuring the data for maximum utility and authority. To really establish this dictionary as the definitive resource, the structure has to accommodate essential secondary data.
Things like multiple artists, alternative versions, that kind of thing?
Exactly. The current format is functional, it's clean, 1 row, 9 languages. But the problem is that oral traditions like music, they aren't that clean. You have multiple versions, and often the artist is the key identifier, especially when that artist has become a political figure.
Right. And the weakness, then, is that this rigid, 1-row format just doesn't allow for that. You can't add the original artist or known alternate titles, and that's crucial information if you're aiming for high fidelity.
I mean, many of these titles are cited in the source material right alongside the artists who were arrested for them.
Correct. People like Ablajan Awut Ayub or Abdurrahim Hayat. If we leave out the artist in this context, we're not just losing metadata.
No, you're leaving out the human cost. The song isn't just a string of words, it's the person who risked everything to perform it.
That is the key. If this list is going to serve as testimony, it must link the translation to the individuals. The format's inability to capture the song's provenance, I think that's the central structural flaw right now.
So the suggestion has to be a structural one. It does. We suggest introducing standardized, mandatory data fields that provide that critical context beyond just the translation. You need to confirm the song's provenance and, resolve any overlaps.
Okay, so what are the most critical fields to add, especially given what's in the source report?
I think 2 new fields are essential: primary artist and known ambiguity version notes. For entries like Ana Yurt, Motherland, or Uyghur, My Uyghur, the primary artist, Ablajan Awut Ayub, and Abdurrahim Hayat should be cited right there. It's vital because the source material explicitly links these artists to imprisonment, which, again, transforms this from translation into testimony.
Citing the artist gives it immediate political weight. I get that. But what about the ambiguity field? I did notice that the title Aladida shows up twice, once with a note in parentheses. How do you systemize that?
That's exactly what the second field is for. You use the known ambiguity field to cross-reference entries that appear more than once, like Alida. You can use it to note that they're the same title, but maybe represent distinct recordings. Or even better, if you know which specific version was cited in the criminalization report, you can clarify the exact point of contention for the state.
Ah, so you're not just noting an ambiguity, you're resolving it. That kind of structural rigor really bolsters the authority of the whole project.
It really does.
Okay, that's incredibly helpful. For our third point, let's dive into the core linguistic details. You've created this 9-language resource. But sometimes the deepest expertise you have, those specific nuances of the source language, that needs to be shared more explicitly with the user.
Right, and this is about completeness and resolving linguistic inconsistency. To really solidify the dictionary's scholarly integrity, a standardization pass is necessary to resolve some of these inherent inconsistencies and clarify semantic overlaps between related titles.
The weakness here seems to be where the list treats conceptually similar terms, or, specialized cultural terms, without providing the defining context. It's sort of expecting the user to fill in the blanks.
Yes, exactly. Several entries present these critical linguistic ambiguities that kind of undermine the whole goal of a dictionary. We see it with the terms for homeland and with the songs related to steps or rhythm.
A dictionary should eliminate ambiguity, not create it.
Right. If 2 words are similar, the dictionary has to explain why they deserve 2 separate entries. Otherwise, the user's just left guessing.
That makes total sense. If they look up Yurtum and Anayurt and both translate to homeland, they're just going to assume it's an error unless you tell them otherwise.
Exactly. So our suggestion is to conduct a full editorial review. You either consolidate those near-identical entries, or you add precise definitional notes, making sure each entry justifies its separation from the others.
Okay, so let's start with those homeland terms, Yurtum and Anayurt. They're listed separately, but the translation is almost identical.
And the source material even links them as yurtam ana ar yurt initially, so you have to make a choice. You can merge them under one definitive header and just note the alternative forms.
Or, if there's a good scholarly reason to keep them separate, you have to define that subtle semantic difference. Maybe one is more personal, more hearth and home, and the other is more political, more the nation.
And you make that explicit in a note field. That's the kind of clarification that makes the resource authoritative. Now, what about the rhythmic terms? We have ikipere, beshpere, uchpere. They're translated simply as 2 steps, 5 steps, 3 steps.
My first thought is that the translations are literally correct. But is steps the right contextual definition? As a non-Uyghur reader, I'm picturing dance steps, but the source hints that it's more like a musical rhythm.
And that's a classic case where a literal translation kind of fails the user. We have to layer in that specialized cultural knowledge.
So for the rhythmic terms, what's the move?
You need to clarify the specific meaning of pere. If it refers to a recognized rhythmic pattern or a dance meter in Uyghur music, a structure, not just the physical step, then you need to add a concise footnote to the first entry explaining that specialized musical term.
So you're moving it from a generic definition to a scholarly, precise musical one. That distinction is crucial. Without it, the user is just left wondering why 3 songs are named after, random numbers of steps.
Exactly. You provide the cultural context that transforms a confusing literal translation into a functional scholarly definition. And that layer of depth is what takes this document from being a list to being a real cornerstone resource.
I can see how applying that standardization layer would instantly elevate the dictionary's scholarly authority. This has been a tremendously insightful critique for an incredibly important project.
It really is. The foundational work is so solid. These adjustments are just about maximizing its structural and its political impact, making sure it really achieves its potential.
So, to recap, we've identified 3 key opportunities. First, transform the list from a simple linguistic compilation into a culturally vital document by explicitly linking titles to the state's categories of criminalization.
Using their own language against them. Then second, enhance the structure by adding that crucial metadata, specifically the primary artist and the version notes, to maximize the utility and historical context.
And finally, ensure scholarly integrity. Conduct that thorough review to standardize translations and resolve the semantic ambiguities, like with the homeland terms, or clarifying that payday is a rhythmic pattern.
That holistic approach ensures the final dictionary isn't just multilingual, but also deeply contextualized and methodologically robust. It becomes a critical tool.
We look forward to seeing the next iteration of this essential work. We invite you to implement these suggestions and submit your work back in again for more feedback.
Welcome to the debate. Our discussion today focuses on, an extraordinary exercise in state control, the systematic categorization and criminalization of hundreds of Uyghur songs. It's all detailed in recent materials outlining a coordinated government campaign.
It is. And this material, it really forces us to grapple with a profound and, frankly, a disturbing question that comes directly from how they've classified these songs, these so-called problematic songs.
Right. So the central question we're exploring is this. Do the state's actions represent a necessary security measure against extremism and separatism, which is the official line, or are they really just a fluid ideological tool designed to police and eliminate fundamental expressions of Uyghur identity and memory that exist outside of party control?
And I'll be arguing that while the scope is, I agree, alarming, the state's classification system reflects a genuine strategic focus on dismantling what it perceives as long-term ideological threats. It's driven by a belief that pan-Islamism and pan-Turkism are existential threats.
And I'm going to argue that the sheer breadth and, the retroactive nature of the ban are undeniable indicators of cultural warfare, purely ideological erasure.
Well, let's begin.
I see why you lead with the security framing, but I really believe that mischaracterizes what's happening here. The ban is fundamentally about ideological control, not fixed security threats. The scope is just too vast. It's too rooted in ordinary cultural life to be solely about terrorism. And the most compelling evidence for me is the retroactive nature of it all. We're seeing songs that were previously approved by state censors, titles sung for generations, even performed on state television. Now suddenly they're illegal. Grounds for detention.
Okay, that retroactivity is disturbing, I'll grant you. But how does that move beyond just a change in the law to become actual cultural erasure?
Because it targets memory, not just current actions. When the law can shift so arbitrarily, it proves that legality is completely fluid. It moves with political paranoia, not with fixed legal principles. And by criminalizing the music of the past, music that defines personal history, family traditions, the state effectively eliminates independent memory. It creates a chilling effect where, families have to self-police their own heritage to avoid prosecution.
That's a powerful assessment. I see that. Though I would frame the intent a little differently. While the categories are, yes, undeniably broad, and we have to acknowledge that, we have to start from the state's foundational logic, which is that ideology is the front line of national security. The government propaganda explicitly links all these songs not just to terrorism, but to the three evils and Western enemy powers. The stated goal is to prevent the penetration of ideology and messing up people's ideology.
But that's precisely the point, isn't it? That conflation, lumping a love song in with a call for separatism, that allows the state to designate any independent thought as a threat.
Yes, but the state perceives any non-official, nationalistic, or traditional reference as inherently destabilizing because of its potential link to these pan-Turkic or pan-Islamic threats. We see this with specific titles flagged under Category 1. Things like Turkistanga Begishleimen, which is I Dedicate This to Turkestan, or Kokbore, Blue Wolf. They're flagged as promoting separatism. The source material even explicitly cites Berdinbur Turkiya, One Religion, One Turkey, as promoting pan-Turkism. So from the state's perspective, any independent ideological framework, no matter how innocent it seems, poses a danger if it preserves references outside the central government's narrative.
Okay, let's look closer at that innocent content, because this is where the policy becomes, deeply absurd. We're talking about songs that reflect basic human experience. How exactly does a song about pure love, Pak Muhabbet, or just longing, Sig Thingamu, Did You Miss Me, how does that become classified as a security threat?
Well, they're not being classified as a threat of violence, but as a threat of ideological deviation.
Exactly. And the categories used to justify it are so vague, they're almost totalitarian. Category 4 targets songs that slander happy lives, and Category 5 bans songs full of religious thoughts, ignoring reality. This effectively eliminates any music that reflects hardship or grief or reflection. It forces a compulsory, state-approved optimism that just negates the lived experience of the population.
I understand the critique, but we have to understand the mechanism the state uses to justify it. The key message is that the state views any expression that deviates from official discourse as negative energy. That term is critical. It's an ideological trigger word in the propaganda, and it allows officials to classify content that generates discomfort or dissatisfaction, or even just remembrance of loss as politically dangerous.
But defining negative energy so broadly just gives them unlimited authority. Look at the popular song Anna Yurt, Motherland. The lyrics just list 12 cities in the region, Kashgar, Hotan, Urumqi, and this is categorized as problematic because it supposedly twists Uyghur history. What history is being twisted by listing cities?
The history that's being twisted is the mandated narrative of national unification. The state security apparatus is gripped by this paranoia that defining a distinct regional identity through music, like listing these traditional homelands, undermines the singular national identity they require. In their framework, if people remember a shared homeland, a yurtum or an anayurt, it actively impedes political unification. The video transcript even cites Category 5 songs, which include lullabies and love songs, for spreading this negativity or having remnants of pan-Islamic ideology just by using everyday words like halal and haram.
That is cultural purification, disguised as counterterrorism. And the enforcement, let's move to the enforcement, because that's where you see the true depth of this.
The enforcement is, you're right, incredibly severe, which really just underscores the priority the state places on this. The source material shows they're using the anti-terrorism law to prosecute actions that are, well, trivial. You have cases of Uyghur men, usually in their 20s, being detained for 10 days simply for sharing a photo on social media, on Kuaishou or Douyin, that had a problematic song like Oo Dedi Yak Yak playing as background music.
And it's staggering to think about that. The act of choosing background music is transformed into sharing extremist material. It shows the law isn't being used to prevent violence. It's being used to achieve total behavioral compliance.
I agree the punishment is disproportionate, but from the state's view, compliance is security. This is evidence of just how deep the surveillance has penetrated into daily digital life. Prosecuting these tiny digital shares shows the government's focus on setting absolute boundaries and, yes, leveraging that law to create a highly fearful environment.
And that fear is the mechanism of erasure. The severity proves it's about control. The punishment is punitive, designed to generate widespread self-policing. It turns cultural memory into a potential crime. And then there's the instruction given to officials and citizens to only download music from official, state-approved apps and to actively report any song you can't find as suspicious.
It turns every citizen into an agent of the state's cultural control.
Precisely. Cultural consumption itself becomes a test of loyalty. If a song isn't in the approved database, it's not just obscure, it's suspicious. It's a potential threat. And that is how you eliminate independent cultural space entirely.
Which brings us to a really crucial aspect of the system, the policing of religious and moral content, where the state is trying to control belief systems themselves.
Yes. I mean, categories 3, 5, and 7 show this campaign goes far beyond separatism. It's an attack on faith. We see songs banned for merely mentioning God, Allah Biridu, for referencing Ramadan, like Ramazan Nakshisi, or even for encouraging moral living, a song called Pakyasha, Live Purely. And the state frames this, incredibly, as sabotaging the government's freedom of religion policy. It's Orwellian, banning faith-based expression to protect religious freedom.
That's a compelling point, but again, we have to look at the government's stated framing, however cynical it sounds to us. The propaganda video claims these songs force people to believe in a religion and detach them from worldly life, which the state views as undermining social production and stability. It directly links the spiritual realm to pragmatic control over the labor force. They're worried about people retreating from secular work because of devotion promoted by music.
But that's a manufactured threat used to justify an ideological mandate. They are criminalizing the vocabulary of traditional moral guidance.
And the system is complex because it tries to cover all deviation, not just religious. We see that in Category 7, which targets songs deemed morally low or promoting promiscuity, specifically citing Sheher Baziri's City Market or Shop Ichgan Uyghur Kwazi, Uyghur Girl Who Drank Wine.
So they're policing secular morality right alongside religious morality.
Exactly. This shows a totalizing effort to enforce one state-approved moral environment. They use these classifications, targeting pan-Islamism, vague moral offenses, negative energy, to eliminate any alternative moral framework, whether it's traditional Islam, a liberal concept of love, or just social realism. The goal is for the only moral reference point to be the one provided by the state.
The fact that they have to ban songs about friendship, dostluk, or farming, Dikhan, and traditional chants, Ole, right alongside explicitly political titles, it just proves this is total ideological warfare. The sheer volume and the vague definitions confirm this campaign is designed to define a vast swath of ordinary cultural heritage as danger. It's a fundamental attack on the capacity for independent expression and collective memory.
The materials clearly show a system where ideological conformity is defined as national security. The state is leveraging legitimate global concerns over terrorism, linking them to perceived threats from pan-Islamism and pan-Turkism. And that allows them to justify eliminating any content, even neutral songs, that could serve as a non-state reference point for identity or history. In their view, the absence of the state narrative is automatically the presence of a threat narrative.
And the consequence of that view is the systematic erasure of a vibrant, complex culture under the color of law.
Ultimately, this exchange illuminates in stark detail how culture, in this case music, is transformed from art into legal evidence. It's enforced with severe penalties under anti-terrorism laws. And we're left to grapple with the core paradox of the state's approach. Can such comprehensive control ever achieve stability without fundamentally erasing the very identity it claims to be protecting?